The lack of interest, I suppose, in what the other side is feeling is only deepens at every round of this conflict. There's already very little understanding in Gaza of what ordinary Israeli people are, of how they feel, how they think. They're so cut off. They most Gazans never leave that tiny enclave. It's just an alien territory.
The crisis in Gaza, explosions have been heard in the southern city of Ashkelon after Hamas warned people to leave by 5 p.m. local time. Israel says it's continuing to attack Gaza. It's hit 200 targets overnight, including mosques, hospitals and schools. More than 1,000 people have been killed since Hamas offensive on Saturday morning. At least 830 Palestinians killed after the Israeli strikes too. We can talk to Richard Spencer, the Times correspondent in Israel. Hello to you, Richard.
Good evening.
Tell me, what are your thoughts on what's been happening? What's the latest from where you are, Richard? The Israeli counterattack, it's been described by their leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, as an attempt to obliterate Hamas. It's only just begun and it's going to be so bloody, isn't it? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's already bloody. The Israelis have, of course, bombed Gaza on numerous occasions before, but I've been speaking to people in Gaza today who've experienced this before and say, one doctor told me that what he was seeing was equivalent in 3 days of bombing to the whole of the previous war in 2014 or in 2009 put together. The Israelis have taken a much broader ranged tactic of targeting whole areas. So they've leveled the area of Rimal in Gaza City, which was the sort of upmarket city center neighborhood where, you know, the leading shops, the best housing developments were, government offices, Hamas offices, and that's just been leveled. The pictures from there are incredibly striking,
Yes.
very reminiscent of what we saw in Aleppo a few years ago, or in Grozny all those years ago. The whole streets just flattened. We spoke to one doctor I spoke to who had got out with his family just in time before his entire apartment block was demolished. He said 10 people were killed inside. There'd been a warning that a building up the road was going to be hit, which was why he grabbed his wife and 3 children and ran for it. But others thought, well, you know, the Israelis will use precision missiles, so they stayed and were killed. The hospitals are overwhelmed already. As you say, 850 or so people already confirmed dead in the bombing.
And look, there will clearly be, from everything we pick up here, Richard, a mood of revenge and retribution widespread in Israel. Will there also be, do you believe, legitimate concern about the possibility of an overreaction? I mean, there will be blood. There has been blood. Hamas have a record of using their own people, Palestinian innocents, as human shields. Could it go far too far in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, the tragedy as you look at this conflict as an outsider is that the incomprehension, if you like, of or the lack of interest, I suppose, in what the other side is feeling is only deepens at every round of this conflict. There's already very little understanding in Gaza of what ordinary Israeli people are, of how they feel, how they think. They're so cut off. Most Gazans never leave that tiny enclave. It's just an alien territory to them. And likewise on Israel, they're so angry about what's happened that there is no understanding of cause for restraint, really. And I mean, I think there's understanding, actually. It's not fair. I spoke to a very interesting woman yesterday who was so angry, but also trying to, she was apologizing for the incredibly harsh language she was using, because she sort of saw the logic of where this conflict goes, this lack of concern for the other side, but she couldn't help expressing it. At a practical level, I'm sure this is exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, is gaming out with his with his war cabinet, with his military advisors, with his generals. He wants to drive Hamas out of Gaza. I think he has in mind something equivalent to what Israel did in Lebanon in 1982, which your older listeners will remember involved a full-scale invasion of Lebanon and literally putting the Palestine Liberation Organization in boats, and led by Yasser Arafat. I think that's what he wants to see. He wants to get rid of Hamas out of Gaza altogether, but he has to be careful he doesn't lure Hezbollah and other actors around Israel into that broader fight, into a broader conflagration. And I suspect that is something he is gaming out.
Indeed. And just lastly, Richard, your thoughts on the possibility of escalation. Now, US intelligence, for example, have not found a direct link between Iran and what happened in Gaza, but that's strongly suspected. Syria, of course, is a sponsor of Hezbollah. Is there a very serious risk of escalation as you read it now?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants escalation, particularly the Americans who... So, I mean, I read these extraordinary interviews with American officials who keep saying, as they did under the Obama administration, we want to get out of the Middle East. We don't care about the Middle East. Apparently unaware that every time they do so, they get dragged further into the Middle East, which is how this region works in its relationship with America. And they are also making these very optimistic statements, blithely saying, oh, we don't see any Iranian involvement. They never actually ask what Iranian involvement means. I mean, we all know that Iran sponsors Hezbollah, it sponsors Hamas, it sponsors Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the other Palestinian group that operates in both Gaza and the West Bank. It gives them missile technology, it trains them, it funds them. Hamas is also proudly independent. It's not a Shia group like Hezbollah. It's Sunni. It has its own political tradition. I'm sure it doesn't just take orders from Iran. Whether in practical terms it could or would have notified Iran about this attack, it kept it obviously incredibly secret, even within Hamas. Otherwise it would have leaked out. That's why it caught everyone by surprise. Whether it notified Iran is a good question. Probably my guess would be yes. Did it, was it ordered by Iran and planned by Iran? No, Hamas has its own ability to arrange these things and organize these things, and Iran allows these proxy groups, if that's what you want to call them, leeway to organize their own military operations. It's just it's a slightly nonsensical question whether Iran was behind it, in inverted commas, and the decision of whether to take retribution against Iran is a political and strategic one, not a punitive one.
All right, Richard Spencer, really grateful for that update. Richard Spencer for the Times in Israel.